This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, and you're very welcome to this episode of the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Francess McDonnell, and this week I'm joined by my colleagues Kathleen O'Sullivan, and later we're also going to hear from Agriland's technical specialists Cathal O'Shea and Breffney O'Brien. But first, it may be the season of goodwill, but it appears to be in very short supply when it comes to the proposed Mercosur trade deal. This week we've seen farmers from across Europe take to the streets to protest both against Mercosur and also in cuts in funding to the Common Agricultural Policy. There's been votes, agreements and disagreements over Mercosur, but it appears, Kathleen, that no one is happy at this stage.
No, Francis, and it definitely is an ongoing and evolving process, but I suppose the update this week is that the European Parliament and Council negotiators informally agreed on measures which they believe protect EU agriculture once the EU Mercosur trade and partnership agreements are in place. However, the so-called safeguards are far less than what farmers had initially hoped for, and certain action will only be triggered if there is an 8% drop in price rather than the 5% drop some MEPs had proposed. Basically, the Mercosur trade deal would see Mercosur countries, such as Brazil and Uruguay, remove import duties on 91% of EU goods. However, on the other side of the agreement, the Mercosur countries would get to sell their goods to the EU with fewer restrictions. These include sugar, honey, soybeans, and importantly to Ireland, meat, specifically beef. The draft regulation sets out how, in the context of the Mercosur trade agreement, the European Commission could decide to temporarily suspend tariff preferences on the import of certain agricultural products considered sensitive, such as poultry or beef, from Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, if these imports are seen to be harming EU producers. Among the measures agreed is that an increase in import volume, more than 8% compared to the 3-year average, would be evidence of serious injury and would trigger an investigation into suspending preferential tariffs. And a decrease in prices of more than 8% compared to the 3-year average would also be treated as serious injury and give reason to start an investigation. Another measure agreed is that the Commission will constantly and proactively monitor imports of sensitive products and produce a monitoring report at least every 6 months with an assessment of the impact of those imports and report to Parliament and Council. The provisional agreement will need the formal adoption by both EU Council and Parliament before it can enter into force, though.
And as we're chatting here, Kathleen, there's a major protest going on in Brussels today, which Irish farmers are part of. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Francis, over 10,000 farmers have travelled from across Europe today for the protests in Brussels, and Irish farmers are among them. So Copa-Cogeca, which represents EU farm organisations and agricultural cooperatives, has organised the protest. So according to Copa-Cogeca, this will be the first time that representatives from every EU country come together to demand urgent action for the future of EU agriculture. A number of issues have driven farmers to protest, according to Copa-Cogeca, and they highlighted that these include what they say are unacceptable post-2027 Common Agricultural Policy proposals that lack commonality and adequate funding, along with the need for simplification, better regulations and legal certainty. Trade policy, of course, such as Mercosur, being pursued by the EU at what is described as being at the clear advantage of the European agricultural sector, is also a key issue for farmers, Copa-Cogeca said. It said that the purpose of the protest is to denounce the EU's growing smoke and mirrors approach to agriculture. Now, there's a strong Irish presence at the protests. Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association members are among thousands of farmers there, and speaking from the event, the association's General Secretary Hugh Farrell said Irish farmers had no choice but to make their voices heard. The Irish Cooperative Organisation Society President Edward Carr joined farmers and co-op members and leaders in Brussels and said ICOS is demanding three things. He said these include a strong, common and properly funded CAP after 2027, fair and transparent trade with real safeguards, including a halt to Mercosur, and real simplification with workable environmental rules. Now, among the youngest of the Irish at the demonstration is 11-year-old Tom, the son of Irish Farmers Association President Francie Gorman. The pair departed on a tractor from Dublin on Monday morning and made their way to Brussels.
Now, this week, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Martin Hayden, said that outbreaks of Bluetongue and bird flu cases on the island highlight the ongoing biosecurity threats that Ireland is now facing. He has just launched a new biosecurity strategy this week, which aims to focus on disease prevention. But he's also confirmed a major move for next year on that front, Kathleen.
Yeah, Francis, so Bluetongue vaccinations will be permitted in cattle and sheep in Ireland next year, Minister Martin Hayden confirmed this week. So according to the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, this follows the recent detection of 4 outbreaks of Bluetongue serotype 3 or BTV3 in Northern Ireland. Minister Hayden said his objective has always been clear: to detect any incursion of Bluetongue as early as possible, to respond as effectively as possible, and to reduce any disease impact on Irish cattle and sheep, and thus the consequences for Irish farmers as far as possible. With the knowledge that Bluetongue is present on the island, the Minister said this changes the risk picture and unfortunately makes it much more likely that the disease will spread during the high-risk season in summer 2026. For that reason, he said he has made the decision to permit the use of vaccination against it in Irish livestock. There are currently 3 BTV3 vaccines approved for use in the EU and widely used in BTV3 affected countries. The Minister believes that vaccination can be a useful tool to protect cattle and sheep from BTV3. He said that the main way this virus spreads is via midges, and we know that right now it is too cold for this to happen in Ireland. He said the high-risk period will be summer 2026, and farmers can consider whether to use the vaccines in spring 2026 to protect their stock in advance of any midge-borne virus spread in the warmer months. The Department of Agriculture plans to publish details of how to apply for a licence to obtain and use these vaccines shortly.
And what is the latest in Bluetongue?
Yeah, so 2 further suspected Bluetongue cases have emerged on a 4th County Down farm, the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland said. Temporary control zone surveillance has indicated suspect cases in 2 cattle on a second farm near Grey Abbey. This takes the total number of suspected infected premises to 4. The discovery came as the National Reference Laboratory confirmed the Bluetongue virus in the first Grey Abbey case and the case on a farm near the site of the original outbreak near Bangor. Following a veterinary assessment of the latest suspect case, a decision has been taken that further extension of the temporary control zone is not required. So Dare Minister Andrew Murr said the emergence of a 4th suspect case during surveillance testing is disappointing, but will not come as a surprise given the scale of the testing undertaken by the department.
Yeah, so watch and wait there, isn't it, really, in Northern Ireland? But there is hope, Kathleen, that some farm families might have one less thing to worry about thanks to a new move by the government.
That's right, so new planning regulations are set to allow farmers to increase slurry storage capacity and construct additional housing for cattle without the need to seek planning permission. So Minister of State for Planning and Local Government John Cummins today signed new regulations which will significantly update planning permission exemptions. This, according to Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Michael Healy-Rae, will deliver badly needed changes for farmers right across the country. So, under these new regulations, the maximum size of a single animal housing structure exempt from planning permission has been increased by 50%. Also, the aggregated total area of animal housing permitted under exemption per farm holding has increased. And for the first time, a standalone slurry storage tank of up to 1,000 cubic metres is permitted under planning exemption, subject to an overall farm storage limit of 1,500 cubic metres. The government had held a 4-week consultation on planning permission exemptions during the summer, which received more than 900 submissions. The exemptions previously had not been updated in almost 25 years. So according to Minister Healy-Rae, the updated exempted development regulations are very welcome and sensible news for farmers. He said that increasing slurry storage capacity and animal housing without the need for full planning permission is common sense planning and will greatly assist farmers in meeting environmental standards, improving animal welfare, and protecting water quality. Meanwhile, Minister Cummins said he is pleased to sign new regulations to give effect to these important changes for farmers. He said they represent a practical, balanced step to support the sustainability of Irish agriculture. He said he is removing unnecessary administrative barriers that have caused delays and added costs, particularly for family farms. The minister added that adequate slurry storage is critical for protecting water quality and improving nutrient management. Likewise, modern and well-designed animal housing supports higher standards of welfare, he said. The minister also stressed that the new changes do not remove oversight or responsibility. He said that all developments will still be required to meet building regulations, environmental protections, and all relevant agriculture standards.
We'd almost think, Kathleen, this week that the government has a to-do list that it's trying to get out of the way before Christmas, but a major move also, hasn't there been, on work permits?
Yeah, so there's some news that will be a relief for farmers again. So Minister for Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, Peter Burke, and Minister of State for Employment, Small Business and Retail, Alan Dillon, have announced the release of new general employment permit quotas for the roles of meat processing operative and dairy farm assistant. So a quota of 1,000 has been provided for meat processing operatives and 850 for dairy farmers assistants. These quotas are available with immediate effect to address constraints in the meat and dairy sectors. Minister Peter Burke said that economic migration is a vital aspect of addressing skill gaps and shortages in the labour market. He said that after significant engagement with the sector and all stakeholders, the decision has been made to extend both quotas based on the demonstrated need in the agri-food sector. He said these quotas recognise the constraints in the agri-food labour market and its importance in particular to the rural economy. This comes after there had been calls in recent weeks for the government to lift or expand the quota of general employment permits for dairy farm assistant roles particularly. And dairy farmers had told Agriland they were concerned as there is high demand in Ireland for skilled workers in agriculture, especially come springtime. But labour shortages are a major challenge for dairy farms.
And just as we've heard there are going to be 850 employment permits for dairy farmers' assistants. But this news comes at a time when milk checks are shrinking. Agriland's technical dairy specialist, Cathal O'Shea, has been taking a closer look at the numbers this week. And there's some startling figures, isn't there?
Hi, Francis. Yeah, so the average dairy farm who's milking 100 cows, they would have seen a 35% reduction in their October milk check versus what they received for their June supplies. That works out a staggering 13,000 pay decrease between the two checks. Now, obviously, Francis, a reduction in milk check is always expected here in the late lactation as production levels drop off, but nobody would have expected it to drop this much. If milk prices had stayed steady and farmers were paid the same prices for October supplies as they were for their June supplies, the loss in production would have only worked out at a 16% reduction in milk checks. Now, that would have been less than half the reduction that was delivered, with the average farm now down 13,000 rather than the expected 6,000. An interesting figure here is if farmers were paid what co-ops were offering in October for their June supplies, their June milk check would have been 22% lower. That's the equivalent of an 8,500 pay cut during mid-lactation.
Yeah, that is very hard to stomach, isn't it? And it's not really likely to improve anytime soon.
No, it's not, Francis. So we're looking at the third quarter of 2026 before there's any upturn. And as of now, prices do not seem to be steadying out just yet. Last week, both Dairygold and Lakeland Dairies delivered additional cuts for November supplies. And now this week, we've seen processors follow this trend with Kerry Dairy Ireland hitting their suppliers with another 3.5 cent cut, bringing them down to a base price of 37.5 cents a litre. Meanwhile, Tirlán have gone with another 2 cent a litre pay cut, bringing them down to a base price of 35.58 cents a litre. However, Tirlán are now offering a 5.5 million support package to its suppliers, who spent more than 5 cents a litre with the co-op in 2025 or will do so in 2026. The support will be in the form of rebates, which include, but are not limited to, items such as concentrates and milk replacers.
Yeah, Carol. And obviously, the general outlook isn't terribly positive at the moment either.
Not positive at all, no. Look, the blame for these prices is still being pointed at the global market. which I suppose is evident following the final global dairy trade auction of 2025, which saw yet another drop. The GDT price index fell a further 4.4% to 1,008, which is now a 25% drop since the last peak, which was in May. The average selling price at the auction was only €2,843 per metric tonne. This is very worrying news for farmers coming into spring, especially with no sign of cost budging. Cheques actually said in its 2026 outlook that net margins per litre could drop as far as 11.5 cents a litre, down significantly from the 21 cent a litre forecasted for 2025. And look, it may not be positive. I know farmers won't want to hear this, but it's survivable if you manage costs and draw up a cash flow budget. We were in a lot worse of a situation in 2023. Cash reserves were not there. But if we get a good year of weather and prices stay strong for cull cows and calves, farmers will be able to stay afloat despite the tough spring that is shaping up to be.
And joining me now is Breffney O'Brien, Agriland's technical beef specialist, because this week Animal Health Ireland unveiled a new 2026 action plan for bovine viral diarrhea. And it's going to mean some major changes, isn't it, Breffney?
Yeah, that's right, Francis. So on Tuesday this week, Animal Health Ireland called a meeting in Dublin with some key industry stakeholders, outlining the BVD Action Plan for 2026. And then I suppose a little bit of a financial review of the benefits of the BVD plan to date. Now, I think it's 13 years, this will be the 13th year, 2026, of tissue sampling calves. When the BVD eradication program first came in, it was initially pitched as only going to take 3 years, I think. So look, while it has been going on longer than was originally expected, there has been some significant progress to date. I think it was 20% of herds had BVD when it first came in. We're down to 200 herds nationally today. So it was brought up at the meeting. The TB levels in Ireland in the 60s, I think it was brought right back down to a very, very small number of herds. And then obviously it escalated to the levels we've seen today. And I suppose the AHI CEO, Patrick Donoghue, said that we don't want to see that in BVD, where we're down to only 200 herds, I think, with it today. And, we don't want to see that escalate. We want to really stomp it out once and for all. So obviously to do that, if we can't keep doing the same thing, so there's going to be a couple of changes to herds that do have a BVD calf confirmed in 2026. Some of these are going to be the herd restrictions. There's going to be blood testing before cattle are moved from a BVD positive herd to make sure that BVD isn't spreading to other herds. There's going to be some other stuff, maybe tracing of where the outbreaks are. Farms within 400 meters, I think, of farms where a BVD case is confirmed will get a letter and a text message to confirm that there has been a BVD outbreak in their local area. And there's going to be more communication from Animal Health Ireland and the relevant stakeholders, giving farmers advice on what to do to reduce the risk of BVD spreading. So yeah, it's going to mean a few significant changes there, but thankfully there's less herds that are going to be affected because there are, as I said earlier, only 200 herds with BVD as of 2025. They also highlighted the analysis that was carried out by Animal Health Ireland that the BVD eradication programme has delivered an estimated €184 million in benefit to the Irish economy through improved herd health, productivity and reduced financial losses. So we are kind of global leaders in the bid to stamp out BVD. And, we're seeing a lot of other countries starting to follow suit, but hopefully we can get it, pushed on that little bit further and eradicated once and for all.
Last month, we sat down for an on-the-record chat with the Chief Executive of the Agri-Food Regulator, Niamh Lenihan. And one of the issues that she focused on was the fact that the regulator needed more powers to do its job the way it wants to. And there's been a big development on that front this week, hasn't there, Kathleen?
Yeah, definitely, Francis. The Minister for Agriculture, Martin Hayden, this week announced the introduction of new regulations that will confer enhanced powers on the regulator. This is part of an effort to strengthen transparency and fairness across the agri-food supply chain. So the regulator was established in December 2023 under the Agricultural and Food Supply Chain Act 2023 and has a dual statutory role. It enforces legislation on unfair trading practices and carries out price and market analysis to improve transparency and equity throughout the agri-food supply chain. Minister Hayden confirmed that he has now signed regulations that will provide the regulator with additional powers to compel the provision of price and market information from businesses in circumstances where voluntary requests for such information have not been complied with. The minister said he is satisfied that these regulations are proportionate and will allow the regulator to provide insightful analysis into the agri-food sector, while having regard to any potential impact on competitiveness or the distortion of competition. The enhanced powers relate specifically to the regulator's price and market analysis function, which is separate from its enforcement role in relation to unfair trading practices. Chair of the Agri-Food Regulator, Joe Healy, welcomed receipt of the regulations, and he said the regulator would immediately commence a detailed review of the provisions of these regulations under which the price and market data function of the regulator will be required to operate.
I don't think it's going to make any difference for what farmers are going to see in their returns for the produce on Christmas shelves, but it'll definitely be interesting to see what it delivers next year. And talking of Christmas, this is the last Farming Week podcast of the year. And we've just time for a quick look back, Kathleen, at some of the bigger stories that we've covered in 2025. Maybe the nitrates derogation is a good place to start.
Yeah, this dominated a lot of talk this year, Francis. There was so much uncertainty for farmers around the derogation, and some detail of what it will entail for farmers is yet to come. But it was huge this month when it was confirmed that Ireland is to keep the derogation for a further 3 years. This year, of course, there was a lot of concern around the Mercosur trade deal too, and this deal, as we said, is a continuing sort of process. But that has been a huge concern for farmers in Ireland and other countries in the EU, of course. There have been outbreaks of bird flu this year on commercial farms, and the threat of bird flu has been a massive worry for poultry farmers around the country. And also, the cases of Bluetongue in Northern Ireland are also very concerning. And like we mentioned earlier, Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden said these outbreaks on the island highlight the ongoing biosecurity threats that Ireland's now facing. I suppose overall for farmers, 2025 was a fairly mixed year. Teagasc economists in their recent review and outlook report on the sector would have acknowledged that favourable weather overall and generally positive market price developments provided the basis for a good year across much of Irish agriculture. And while milk prices they fell considerably towards the end in recent months, dairy farms would have experienced higher prices in much of 2025, and beef farmers also had a strong year in terms of prices. There was an increase in prices for sheep and lamb producers as well overall, and average incomes are expected to have increased on tillage farms this year too.
Well, we'll be hoping it is going to be a very positive year next year for farmers. But for this week and for this year, and from all of us here in Agriland, including Kathleen, Cathal, and Breffney this week, we'd really like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us week in, week out. We've very much appreciated your company. So we'd like to wish you and your families a very happy, peaceful, and healthy Christmas. And we look forward to keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture in 2026. And if you do get a moment, please don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Happy Christmas.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings, or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.